When people come to me to work on financial freedom, they all come interested in the outcome. Like they all come and say, yeah, I want to be financially free. I want to take a paycheck. And I use the same framework, the same method with every single person. I'm the same coach and I am the coach or the consultant. And for the most part, people succeed and we get them to where they want to be. But there are those people who don't. And so I'm always curious, why is it that some make it and some don't make it? I think a component of it is commitment versus interest. So like I said, everybody's interested, right? And when you start a business, you're always interested in financial freedom, time freedom. Like that's why entrepreneurs start businesses and take the risk. But those that are committed will do what's uncomfortable and inconvenient to get the outcome.
All right, today we have an exciting show. We're going to be talking all things business, entrepreneurship, taking product-based businesses from financially stressed to financially free, and much more. So a lot of inventory-based businesses, they struggle because they probably buy too much supply and then they have cash flow problems. Well, Ciara, our guest on the show today, specializes in this. And when I was researching the background, she has an amazing background too. She's grown a franchise, did like 13 locations, sold that, learned the hard ways, and now she helps her clients go from being financially stressed to being financially free, which is what we're all trying to do on this channel. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so glad we connected. I'm really excited to visit with you and your audience today.
Thanks so much. So I actually wrote out questions. I hardly ever do this, but I kind of thought this would be good because you have such a good background. So my first question to you is, you work with a lot of founders. What separates the ones who succeed from the ones that continue to struggle regardless of the industry, would you say?
Yeah, so this is a wonderful question to start off our conversation. I would say this is something I have been really trying to figure out because when people come to me to work on financial freedom, they all come interested in the outcome. Like they all come and say, yeah, I want to be financially free. I want to take a paycheck. And I use the same framework, the same method with every single person. I'm the same coach and I am the coach or the consultant. And for the most part, people succeed and we get them to where they want to be. But there are those people who don't. And so I'm always curious, why is it that some make it and some don't make it? I think a component of it is commitment versus interest. So like I said, everybody's interested, right? And when you start a business, you're always interested in financial freedom, time freedom. Like that's why entrepreneurs start businesses and take the risk. But those that are committed will do what's uncomfortable and inconvenient to get the outcome. So I am a triathlete. And when I did my first Ironman, I wanted the medal. I wanted to cross the finish line. Like I was interested, right? But the commitment came when it became very uncomfortable, very inconvenient to train, very uncomfortable on race day. The commitment is what separates the people who finish and cross the finish line from those who give up. I think the same thing in entrepreneurship. So that's been kind of what I've been going with. I thought, okay, this makes sense. But just recently, I've gone a little deeper. It's not just the commitment, it's also self-awareness. And I'm guessing that you've seen this. So entrepreneurs that are self-aware, they can see where they're screwing up. They can see where they've done well. They will humbly take feedback. Those are the ones. Because if you meet an entrepreneur who cannot get out of their own way, it doesn't matter. They just are not going to make it.
And I was watching. It was a YouTube video podcast that you were interviewed on. I think it was on Inventoria or one of those. And you were answering. I loved how you explained the P&L because it was really like everybody could understand it. Because I think people get overwhelmed
Yes.
with financial statements, P&L. I liked how you talked about the margins and the gross margin and really kind of, I think what we have to do in business is put it in like 8th grade language, right? Because
Yes.
even when you write something, that's how people comprehend. And I could just tell you're a great teacher the way you broke that down. That stuck out in my mind when I was watching that video, because I think a lot of people out there just don't have the basic financial education, right? Because they don't
Right.
really teach it in school. And
Right.
so that's where really, if you could rewind back to when you built your retail business, and I think you had 12, 13, 14 locations, and then, that that's really where you cut your teeth on many. I mean, you cut your teeth starting back in 2006, it sounds like, but all those steps you took until the realization, because you were heavy product, right? Because you
Right.
always were buying and selling, and so like with these types of businesses. So actually, first, can you break down like your avatar? Who can
Yeah.
you help in this world?
Yeah. So, any entrepreneurs that sells inventory, I can help you. So wholesalers, retailers, manufacturers, distributors, salons, if you exchange things for dollar bills, you have inventory. I really try not to get into food. I'm not super passionate about food, although that's inventory also. But really things, makers, Etsy shops, and really there's so many inventory based businesses out there. So if you have products, I'd love to help you. And then narrowing that down even more, my avatar is really someone who typically grosses 500,000 to 5 million, 10 million or so in revenue annually. And I say this because not because the number's fancy, because we talk about that, like vanity metrics don't matter, but because typically when you are grossing that amount of money, there's a couple qualifiers that really let me do a great job for you. One, you have proof of concept. Like if you can do a 500,000 in revenue, you have something that's sellable and that's working. And I need numbers in order to help you with your numbers. And then also, typically in that size of a business, the owner's very involved still. So when you get kind of past that 10 million mark, you might have an in-house accountant, you have a team, the owner might be more absentee. And I work with owners and founders. So I want to be there with the decision maker. That doesn't mean that I'm going to turn them into an accountant, but I want to teach them and give them the confidence with their numbers. So those are kind of the things that really make my avatar in the work that I do.
And so that makes a lot of sense. So a lot of these e-com businesses that have physical products that they're moving, if done right, they can scale really quickly. And
Yeah,
I understand your avatar. You're helping the ones that like right before they might be able to hockey stick even bigger, where they're going to have more infrastructure and staff. You can really help them, and probably people. I would imagine people that they have proof of concept, and now it's like,
yeah,
okay, let's grow this. A lot of these people I watch, they want to grow something and then sell it. So I would
yeah,
imagine your skill sets actually help them realize that vision and get a higher multiple on a sale, because all of this
exactly.
stuff matters. Everybody wants clean books to, when somebody comes in to buy it, here we go, look, here's the margins. Everything is detailed out, and that's really your background. Where where did these unique abilities that you gotten come from? Was that just from like just learning hard knocks, or how did you
Yeah.
develop these skills?
No one's ever asked me that before. I think a lot of it is learned, like you said, through the hard knocks, rising and falling, winning and losing. But I also think I'm just really gifted in simplifying complex situations and in helping people understand, like you mentioned earlier, like when I break down the financials, just helping people understand in a way that is non-intimidating, and believes in them and gives them the confidence. Um, I'm just really good at taking a mess. I always like to say, if you backed me up to your grandma's garage and it was like full of stuff and you opened it up, I would say, give me a couple hours, go away. And I could take all of that mess of whatever's in there and figure out how to add value to it, how to sort it, how to organize it. My brain just works really well that way. And I also think that I understand the entrepreneur's brain really well because I am one, but I also really understand the accountant's brain. And that's really important. I'm working with a client right now, and we are really working to bridge the gap between the entrepreneur founder and her in-house accountant. They don't understand how one another thinks. And so it's just butting heads, a lot of frustration. And I can come between and say, okay, an entrepreneur is going to look at things like this. They're going to think about things like this. Let's lean into that strength. And the accountant is going to think about things like this. It doesn't make them bad or wrong. It's just how their brain works. And so being able to bridge those things together, I think also gives me a really unique qualification to help these founders, move towards financial freedom.
So let's just say we had somebody and they've had success. They're doing $1 million of top line revenue. But there's only like a 5% margin, right? Like a profit margin. So something is wrong, right? Because
Yeah.
that industry or sector maybe should be 10 or 15% or 20%. So you'll come in and you dissect what's going on. Give me like just kind of like a high level, like
Yeah.
you can use a case study, but don't name names, obviously. Just like how you go in and then how do you bring more profit into the deal by the inventory? I still wanted like, what
Yeah.
are some tips there? I'm
Yeah, for
curious on
sure.
that.
So I'll start by just like quickly outlining a P&L because it really all comes back to that, and like a profit and loss, income statement, whatever we want to call it. A lot of times very overwhelming to an entrepreneur, not interested in it. They don't care about the numbers, or they're getting these consistently. They know there's value, but they look at it and they're like, I don't know what to do with that. So I start by looking at their P&L always, and I can tell within 10 seconds what's going on in their business, because on a P&L, it's like a rear view mirror. It's always going to show us what's already happened with the sales and the expenses associated. So we have our sales at the top, and then inventory based businesses, so important. We have cost of goods sold, our COGS. This is the cost of goods that have sold to make the sales. So if I did 100,000 last month, what did I sell to make the 100 grand? And what did that cost me? Not what I bought, but what did that cost me? And then the difference between that is our gross margin. This is one of my biggest levers. This is the lever I always pull first. So gross margin, because the gross margin then has to pay for everything underneath it, which is our expense section, fixed and non-fixed. So we're not looking at debt and we're not looking at inventory purchases. And then the difference between all of that is net profit. So really there's just 5 buckets that we have to focus on. And within those buckets, sales, cost of goods, gross margin, expenses, net profit, we have levers that we can pull. So when I go into a business, the first thing I do is say, send me your P&L. And I don't really care what period of time it's for, because I can look at it and I can usually 99% of the time I'll say, okay, well, the first thing we're doing wrong is we're not recording our cost of goods accurately. So many inventory-based businesses are on a cash accounting system instead of accrual. And this is because it's easy for the bookkeeper. Let's just be honest. And the entrepreneur doesn't know any different. So in a cash-based system, you're just going to say, oh, I bought $100,000 of inventory today at market. I'm going to expense it out. Well, if you made $100,000 in sales that month and you bought $100,000 in inventory and they're expensing it out, you have no gross margin. You have no clean data to work from. So I always look at that first, and then from that, sort through what's going on. So the next thing I do is just drop to the bottom. What do we have in net profit? And do we have corresponding cash in the bank? If not, what kind of debt do we service? So those are the things that we kind of sort out. And then once I start to sort out those puzzle pieces, we can make a plan.
So accrual analysis would be better because if you're buying $100,000 product, that might be 6 months of inventory or whatever, right?
Exactly.
So if you're taking it all today, so you always have them switch to an accrual accounting
Yes,
process or the
always.
P&Ls?
And I'll
Yeah.
tell your listeners, if they're like, oh, geez, what's good? And you go to your bookkeeper and say, I just heard this crazy gal. She said I have to switch to accrual. Chances are they're going to push back on you because it's not more difficult. It's just more steps. But I really want to encourage your audience. That is your bookkeeper's job, is to do your books accurately. So learn what you can about accrual and cash so that you feel educated and confident. But if you have inventory, you have to push your bookkeeper to be using the accrual system.
So that really makes a lot of sense because if they have like 10 different product lines they're ordering, they'll never have a really good, accurate feel of what actually is actually producing the best margins.
They
Because,
don't. Nope.
yeah.
And
So
you'll
that's
have
like,
these
yeah.
crazy swings of like, so case study, I had a client come in and she's like, I have no idea what's going on in my business. She was doing over $500,000. I mean, she was doing great. She did have cash in the bank account. She actually did not have debt, but she's like, I feel so out of control. And so she sent me her P&L. First thing I saw, okay, 1 month we're making 80 grand, 1 month we're losing 20,000, 1 month, and right away I was like, they're not accounting your inventory correctly. So when she was buying, it was showing this crazy loss. Then she would sell that 6 month or 3 month supply and have 100% margin on her P&L and show an amazing profit. It never gave her good decision making power because she didn't know what was going on with the numbers.
And probably too, just thinking from the outside in is like when you understand your P&L, you can also renegotiate with your vendors that you're buying the product from and say, look, we need this instead of a net 30, we need this on a net 90 or whatever. So it's a longer
Yeah.
period. Like all that, that's actually, you're making, I never thought about things like that, but like, that's how important this is. You can take a business that's not making any margin to making margins basically by just switching a few things around. And that's just
Yeah.
one example. So that's pretty powerful. I think that people need this P&L training in general. So like, even if it's not an inventory based business, like they still
Yeah.
need to understand this, because this is like the like the gasoline for the car. I mean, it's, if it's not,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
if you run out of gas, it's not, you're gonna fail. So even like, there's a lot of businesses that are like constantly struggling. The owners never have any money to put in their pocket at the end of the day. They're doing like great top line. It's like, why can't you make money doing $1
Yeah.
million in top line? And so like, these tweaks are really important. And
Yeah.
so how do you have like, did you go to school to be like an accountant? How did you develop
No.
those skills?
I did not. So I didn't even graduate from college. In fact, and the college classes I did take were in the arts. I mean, I did no athletic anything in high school. I had a theater company that I started in high school and was a flute player. So as far from this as you can get. And then when I closed the theater company, I was married, had a couple kids, closed that, decided to open the retail store. I was like, I can sell stuff. And I can sell stuff, which is what most entrepreneurs can do, right? So I opened that in 2006. I mean, I remember arguing with my first bookkeeper about cost of goods sold and this concept. And the problem is he couldn't explain it to me like I can explain it to an entrepreneur. So he would just argue with me, no, it belongs on the balance sheet. And I was like, what is a balance sheet? That is so confusing. So then I wouldn't even look at the financials. And what happened was, fast forward to 2017, I had a franchise, like you mentioned, multiple units. We ended up having a coup within the system. So a couple bad actors. And, we filed trademark infringement and all of that. We won all the lawsuits, but we lost everything, including our home, while they kept their stores. It was pretty tragic and traumatic. And so that was the juncture of time where I was like, okay, I can either sit on the couch and grow bitter because these things were done to me after working so hard and investing my home and my life savings and everything. Or I can say, okay, yes, there was circumstances beyond my control, but what did I contribute to that? And when I chose to be self-aware and to look and say, what did I contribute? The common denominator was I had built a business on top line revenue, because that's what we do. 7-figure business, multiple seven, all these fancy terms, and not on profitability. And so I was always making decisions on what would sell me more stuff. And as I got more and more into financial stress, I just kept selling, because that's what we do as entrepreneurs. Well, I'll just make more money and it'll fix my problems. But those problems just grew alongside the revenue. And so I said, I'm going to do something different this time. I'm going to figure out the numbers. I'm going to learn the financials. I'm going to build a business that pays me from day one. Not going to buy into this fallacy of like, you can't be profitable for 5 years, all these things we hear. And so I launched my next business, pay myself from the beginning, worked way less hours, built and sold it within 18 months. And it was through that I started doing this work with other entrepreneurs of like, you can be confident with your numbers, you can build profitability, and you can pay yourself. So to answer your question, no formal training, but very, very expensive training.
Yeah, I think that's the best kind of I didn't go to university either. I tried to. But what I realized later in life was, it wasn't that I was a bad student. It was that I wasn't interested in what they were teaching. And
Exactly. I love to
then
learn.
me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
right now, actually, I felt like I always have conversations with people. Well, one thing I'll go back to is, I do SBA, but I also do franchise consulting. And people when they're looking at different franchise concepts, they're always looking at, oh, wow, this HVAC company does, average, with two territories does 4 million in top line revenue. But I'm like, that top line revenue doesn't matter. It's really what you put in. Like, if you did $1 million and had the same revenue as a $4 million company, and you had less employees and less pain points in your business, which business is better for you?
Yes.
And people are like, people just, everybody goes to top line thinking that's the most important. That's like by far not the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like if I was looking at a business, I'd go, what's my overhead? Is it recession resistant to a certain degree? And, how many employees and what are the pain points of the business? I'd much rather take a low overhead business personally. So I think
Yeah.
people just need this financial education. Like right now, I'm taking some tax classes because I know I work with a lot of people that are tech employees making 5, 6, 700 grand a year in Silicon Valley. They know nothing about how to offset earned income with
Mhm.
depreciation, all this stuff. And it's weird to say today that I find it very fascinating that because that's like a third of the equation for financial freedom is
Yeah.
lowering your taxable consequences and like understanding this stuff. So I think I'm pushing for a movement where people start getting the big picture. Like my brother, for example, I always bash on him. He's $1 million a year earner, W-2, like super smart, economics degree, you name it, works in financial services, has no tax strategy, has no tax plan. And
Right.
it's just like crazy. It's like, I applaud the entrepreneurs. I think where the entrepreneurs struggle is exactly what you're helping them like get unstuck. So they
Yeah.
can take a business that they're like, hey, I don't understand it. They feel like they're spinning the wheels. And what do they end up doing most of the time is like shutting the doors because they get frustrated. Where they
Yeah.
can do simple tweaks. And also, if they have good books, what does that mean? It means they can get more, purchase order financing, all this stuff to help their business grow because that's what they need in the beginning is more capital, and they're not going to get capital if they don't have good books. So I love
Yeah.
the way you're coaching it. Do you have a graphic of your P&L? Like I loved that. I want to see it visually because I liked how
Yeah,
you
you know what?
explained.
I don't, but I whiteboard out all the time in my classes and coaching because
Yeah,
entrepreneurs are very visual, which is why you can see that and picture that. I
yeah,
think that's something kind of going back to like 3 questions ago too, like why I do what I do works. It's because, like I said, I understand the entrepreneur's brain. So it's not just hearing it, but a lot of us as entrepreneurs, we need to see it. So I don't have like a fancy, I'm not very techy at all, but I whiteboard a lot. So I'll just whiteboard it out and show them. As an example, I just did a class for my mastermind about accrual and cash basis. And I wrote it out on a whiteboard. Here's a P&L in cash. Here's a P&L in accrual. Here's what happens with the bottom line when you're doing one way or the other. And all of them were like, oh my goodness, this makes so much sense. Just by writing out, you know, we aren't great at like algebra a lot of times or like scientific things, but all of us know how to add and subtract. And
yeah.
a P&L is just an adding and subtracting exercise. And if at the bottom it's negative, we have to change something so that it adds or subtracts to give us a positive number. And so when people are like, okay, I can handle that, it like opens a whole new world to them.
I love that. You have a series of books. One, I think the first one was called Inventory Genius, the book, and
Yeah.
then the most recent one is called Profit Genius book. Um, Talk about your most recent book because I think that's going to appeal to people that might not just have an inventory based business. But what's Profit Genius book about? What's the premise of the book, and what can they get out of that book when they read it?
Yeah, so both books are very short. You can read them on an airplane because none of us have time to sit down and read a ton of stuff. We're working in our businesses. And it's a lot of what we're talking about. So Profit Genius just really talks about like, how do you get profitable in the business? If you have cash coming in, even if there's cash on paper, like profit on paper, but still no money in the bank account, why? Like, what are the missing links? And then I just walk through those levers you can pull. Like, how do you pull the margin lever? And even if you don't sell inventory, we all have gross margin. So a service-based business like mine, I don't have inventory anymore, but I have COGS that are associated with my revenue. Like my coaches, without my coaches, I couldn't sell coaching. I have coaches underneath me. And so that's a cog, right? So we all have gross margin. And so Profit Genius just talks about like how gross margin is our secret weapon. How do you create more gross margin in the business? If you have profit on paper, but there's no money in the bank account, why? Where is it? And how do you fix that? And then I also talk about debt, which I know you're passionate about, like helping entrepreneurs with their debt and like having good, healthy debt or getting out of debt. And I talk about how that plays into it because I'll say that's the last thing I'm just so passionate about and people do not understand is that you can be profitable on paper and be negative in the bank account if your debt is not managed properly, because debt does not show up on a P&L. So, and to your tax point, like I had a business, she made like 100 grand last year, so she owes on that, but she has no money in the bank account. And she's like, well, I don't have $100,000 in the bank account. Now I owe taxes on it. What is going on? Well, she had a massive amount of debt she was servicing, and that ate up all the cash. So while the government says, oh, you're doing great, you're profitable, you owe money, she actually doesn't have the pieces put together. And so Profit Genius just kind of walks through that in a very elementary, easy to understand way.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, this is what I think. This is very unsexy. Like in theory, people think all of this stuff is unsexy, but I think once you become an entrepreneur, you realize how this is the most sexy thing, because these types of tweaks are what really move the business into the right direction, so you're profitable. And that's the most important thing. If you didn't have to sell more product, and you can go from not making money to making a 20% margin, don't you think that's like way more attractive than doing anything else? Like most people, all they're doing is trying to push to sell more, and they're in this hamster wheel cycle, and they'll never get out of it unless they understand these principles. That's what really like I know, like myself, I'm not very good because money comes in, money goes out, and I'm not tracking the way I should. I know that. And I would coach people to obviously do everything the right way. But that's things we have to do, right? And even like when money comes in, paying yourself first and putting a little bit away, right? You put some in a tax fund, you put some in like hey, I'm not touching this. This is my reserve account. And most of us entrepreneurs are too busy in the day-to-day. We're scrambling around and we're not doing that. And then 5 years later, you're like, oh, I could have set up a self-directed retirement account. Could have done this. Because you're not going to miss $200 out of your account a month, right? But like compound that over at a 10% growth rate, and it just starts going. Then at least you have something left. And I think people need all of this coaching in order to do it, because everybody I talk to, everybody wants to own a business, right? Now, some people will never, because they got the golden handcuffs on, but it's very achievable if you learn the basics of like all of like entrepreneurship. And this is one of the biggest pieces that people are missing. So I applaud you for doing all of this good work in the world. My next question for you, because you're working with a lot of different types of businesses, online, Etsy stores, e-com, different, what trends are changing, or what, if you were looking for opportunity in businesses, what are they right now, would you say, like going forward for the next 5-10 years?
I think more than just a trend, it's more of a way of doing business. So definitely the high touch is coming back. Example, I have a retail business in California. She has 3 brick and mortars. I mean, one of the hardest places to run a brick and mortar clothing women's business. Okay. So she'd have everything going against her, if you will, right? And she wasn't hitting her targets that we put in place. So she's trying to figure it out. So she decided, and she had grown to a place where she has multiple team members, director of ops, all the things. And I said, I think you just need to get back on the floor. Like you need to get back in there and see what's going on. Because she's a good entrepreneur and self-aware, she's like, I'll do that. I don't want to do it forever, but yes, I will do that. So she went back in. I will tell you what, within, I am not kidding, 24 hours, she was hitting goal, because she was seeing, okay, this is how people, the way that I set up my merchandising and so forth and so on, worked 3 years ago, doesn't work that way now. And she kept pounding into her team, like, here's how we do it. Got back on the floor, saw how people shopped, the high touch that they need, what they were looking for, made those adjustments, and she's been making goal ever since. So I think that's a trend, if you will, right? Like getting in there and understanding the consumer's mind, because it's different than it was in 2020, pre-2020, all the things. And then also what's working really successfully, really well for my clients is when they focus on one thing. Like you've got to get into a boring business. And, example, I had a client who did sell skincare, homemade skincare, like organic, lotions, soaps, lip gloss, all the things. What was making her the money, I'm not kidding, was the $1.50 lip glosses. And she's like, but I love making the lotions and the scents. And I said, okay, well, we can love that or we can like making money. So you get to pick. So thankfully, another self-aware entrepreneur said, I will choose what actually works. So she just went hard after those lip glosses, and she has a 6-figure business, highly profitable, and all she makes is lip gloss all day long. So it's about finding one thing and narrowly focusing on it, because that helps with your marketing, your avatar, your expense, like everything. And entrepreneurs are very, I want to add another thing. I want to do all the fun things. But I think in this day and age, the more narrowly focused you can get and like honed in on what you do well, the more profitable you'll be more
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. I noticed that about myself. I want to do all these things every
So do
day.
I. So do I. I mean, I still fight that battle, right? We're entrepreneurs, so we're always going to have ideas, but it's, there's a lot of ideas, but what will actually make us money? Because at the end of the day, if I'm making money in my boring air quotes business, I can do a lot of creative things with my time and my freedom. So
Yeah. I somehow I was watching a YouTube video. I follow a guy named Joe Polish. He has a mastermind called Genius Network. He's really awesome entrepreneur. And he had a lady by the name of Kathy Colby on, and I was
okay.
fascinated because she created the Colby assessment. And it's like,
Yeah, I've taken the Colby. I'm a 10 quick start.
I'm a
So talk
seven,
about ideas.
I'm a
Like,
7283. I'm fascinated with that. Actually, what I'm doing with the Colby is I'm going to have all my candidates that are looking to get into entrepreneurship, business ownership. I'm going to give them that. We also have a lady named Rebecca Monet created something called the Oracle profile, which helps us assess what
okay.
business models from a scientific standpoint. It's like I call it a DISC profile on steroids.
Sure.
And so I'm going to have them now. I'm going to learn. I'm going to get certified to be a Colby trainer so I can understand it on a higher level. So when I have a new candidate that comes in and says, hey, I want to own a business. Now I'm going to take them through my own gauntlet that I set up so I can help them figure out what type of business would make more sense. Because,
Yeah. So
people
smart.
have all this vision of like, oh, I want to own a restaurant. No, you don't want to own a restaurant. Trust me. Um, I'm a part owner of a restaurant. I don't.
That is one thing I said I will never own a restaurant. No, not interested.
Everybody that owns a restaurant tells you not to own a restaurant, and I invested it as a minority partner into like this restaurant. It's also got a marina with like 110 boat slips. But the restaurant drove all the revenue. When my business partner took over, what happened? Revenue dropped because he's not a restaurateur,
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
and now he's like, oh, I should have never bought this. I feel bad because it's been painful for him.
Yeah.
There was a lot of upsides because we were putting RV pads on the property and stuff. So
Oh, sure.
eventually it'll work itself out. But yeah, I think also finding the right business, right? And like with this day and age, what do you see all day long? You see Amazon trucks going by you. We know. So I see a lot of people coming to me for SBA financing for like e-com type businesses. And like, I know some guys one of my friends is doing like a very large acquisition where I don't know exactly what product, but I see that also is going to be a pain point for many of those people that don't know inventory. And
Yeah.
like, I might have some referrals for you soon because
I love it. Send them my way. We'll get them
that,
cleaned up.
that's actually probably a good thing for them to do as they're transitioning and buying this business, to get somebody like you in, like you could probably help them in a big way because they might not
Yeah.
understand what this inventory is going to look like and like how to do it in a more strategic way. Because if they do it wrong, they don't have a shortage of inventory, right? If they do too much inventory, they have too much inventory. So you have to so basically what you're going to have to do is go back and really make sure the accounting is and the P&Ls, so you can see everything itemized depending on the product line. Because if you don't know that, then you come in and just order a bunch of stuff, then it could be sitting there for months, and
Right.
now you have a cash flow problem.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think it's important too, like with inventory based businesses, to measure certain key performance indicators or KPIs. So like, what's your inventory turn as a whole? What's your inventory turn in specific categories, right? Because you might have a business where they don't have a lot of margin growth potential in certain brands or categories because there's MAP pricing. And so, whenever I start with someone, I'm like, let's look at the margin. And they're like, I can't raise my prices. I won't sell anything. There's lots of ways of raising your margin besides just raising your prices. So looking at product mix, if you do have MAP pricing and certain things, what other items can you bring in to drive margin up? What's turning? Is it a volume play or a margin play? Like, these are all things that inventory-based businesses should look at. And if you're looking at buying a business, you need to know that. You need to know if they're way over inventoried. So are you paying for a bunch of dead inventory because you're buying it as an asset sale, let's say, and they say, oh, I have this much in inventory. Well, none of that is like really sellable. I love to go into businesses too and help them like clean out, simplify, liquidate down. Like, let's get really, and they're a lot of times emotionally attached to their inventory. But I'm like, it's cash on hangers, cash in boxes. It's literally dollar bills sitting on your shelves. So we need to turn those dollar bills into dollar bills that make you more dollar bills, not just sit and collect dust. So all of those things are important before even people maybe go to look to get financing, like asking the right questions of the people they're buying from, or if they're looking to sell, get that stuff cleaned up. Because I would think you're the expert in this, but if you walked into a bank or work with someone like yourself and said, here's my inventory, here's what I'm doing, here's the margins, you'd be like, whoa, okay, they know what they're talking about, right? So get prepared with those inventory questions and answers.
Yeah, even if they're in a startup phase, if they have a good business plan, we can do off projections. So if they have a good business plan and good projections, like they can get SBA financing for startups or for working capital. Or so, yeah. I mean, everything you're doing makes a lot of sense, and I wish more people would understand that this is probably the most important thing to be successful. Because sure, you can sell stuff, but selling stuff and actually being profitable and being able to continue the business in a positive trajectory is another thing. And I think there's a huge need for you, because that's the difference between shutting your doors and keeping them open. And you've lived a whole thing, and you have the scars, the battle scars, right? And that's important. Like having battle scars. I love it. I'd love to have you speak at our summit we're doing April 26th.
I love it.
It's called Business Ownership Summit. It's April 26th from 9 a.m. Pacific time to 12. But I'd love to have you do a session on your basically Profit Genius book. You have to check your schedule, obviously, but like a 45-minute session or a 40-minute, just kind of the overview of, the basics that we just covered. I think that would be amazing. So if you can check your schedule.
Anytime I can talk about numbers with people, I'm happy to do it, because just so passionate about, I know what it's like to put everything on the line for your business and wake up at 2 a.m. and wonder if paychecks are going to clear. And I know what that feels like to live that every day and just the exhausting hamster wheel. And I also know how much hope there is on the other side. And I've seen so many of my clients just find so much financial freedom. And so anytime I can help people, even a little bit, I'm all for it. So I'll look at my calendar and let you know.
So if somebody has a business with merchandise and they're doing around 500,000 or greater, you would be a great person through your coaching program where you can help them become more profitable. So where would they reach out to you?
Yeah, I would love to have a conversation. I think my website would be the best, ciarastocklin.com. And if you're under that 500,000 mark, I still want you to start getting a good foundation in place. So just get the book, Inventory Genius. It's like on Amazon, it's $10. You'll read it, reread it, highlight it. I have a podcast you can listen to where I go through, I'm going to have you on as we talk about SBA. I mean, I just bring in people that can help. So don't shy away from the numbers until you get to 500. Like, start building that good foundation so that you're ready to grow and scale, and then let's connect.
Awesome. This was awesome. I am even more motivated just to really get my financials in order, really understand my P&L. Like, some months are great, some months are slow. Understanding your numbers is the way to drive a business. How many people, like even from how many sales did you make, or how many customers came in to your website and how many are converting? This is all stuff we need to be tracking. If you're not tracking, you don't have no idea what's going on. And I think that's what happens with a lot of entrepreneurs. Our phones are ringing off the hook. We're crushing it. And then at the end of the month, we're like, well, where's the money?
Where's the money? Yep.
Yeah. So this was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
If you're looking to acquire a business, stop scrolling on Biz Buy Sell and visit franchiseresellelistings.com. We'll do a customized search. You can get on our weekly distribution where we're sending new inventory weekly to your inbox. So visit franchiseresellelistings.com and opt in today. See you there. Hey guys, Bo Exian here. If you enjoyed what you saw, please subscribe to this channel. We talk all things financing. I've been in the lending industry for over 20 years, and I'm happy to answer your questions and provide great content.